All marketing comes down to two things: time or money. So it's like, if you got the time, great, but eventually you're going to run out of time. Hopefully by that point you got the money, because like that's really what it comes down to, you know.
Well, we spend a lot of time talking about social media, video content, and AI, and how all these tools can help you get found by your audience. But what happens after somebody finds you? Email marketing has been around for decades, yet it continues to deliver some of the highest returns in marketing. But the response I hear from clients is that email is dead. So today we're talking with Sam Sarsten of Then Can Designs, who's one of the most results-oriented people I know in marketing. And if email wasn't working, Sam would not be doing it. Sam, welcome to Cringe Mountain Diaries.
I'm very happy to be here. I've been climbing Cringe Mountain for a minute.
Yeah, you have. So why don't you tell our audience who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Sam Sarsten. I'm the owner of Then Can Designs. We specialize in helping predominantly local service providers get recommended by Google and ChatGPT. We also build websites for them. I'd say like our main industry we work with is like contractors. So people that come to your house and do a thing, but we've also worked with small law firms, health and wellness, and a lot of things in between, all the way down to storage facilities. So yeah, that's what we do. We try to help you get found, and then hopefully that drives more business to your business, and we grow together.
Yeah, I brought you on the podcast today was to talk about email marketing because I've seen you use it a lot because I'm on your email list. And I wanted you to kind of tell us how you kind of started using email and then what results you've seen from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for subscribing to the newsletter. And I'm glad to know it's not just my mom that listens to it or reads it every single week. Just kidding. My mom doesn't read it. But yeah, I mean, I think early on, I was curious about all the different forms of marketing. I like to think of it as like a marketing pie chart. And so for all of our businesses, if we put all our eggs in one basket, it's just not really a good way to gamble or do your marketing for your business. And so, when I looked at email marketing, I saw that a lot of studies say that it's the highest return on investment. It's just usually the thing that hangs people up is you've got to build a list and then you got to engage with it somewhat frequently. And so that's usually what hangs people up. But, I was like, I have all the time in the world. I'm just starting my business. So why not start a list and see what happens? So I started my list actually at the start of 2024. And I mean, the list isn't huge. I think it's about 800 people right now. But, we have like every week, I would say we get about a 50% open rate. So
yeah. That's really good. So 2024 is not really that long. So, I mean, if people are, hesitant to kind of get started, what would you say to them?
I mean, I think it's so easy, whether it's SEO or email or social media, to think like, oh, if I'm not hitting these ginormous numbers, then I'm not really getting good results. But the nice thing with the email list is like, if you have like a list of people that are really engaged, it might only be 30 people, but those 30 people, like if they're all opening it, like, I've heard this analogy before when it comes to like email marketing is like, imagine like if I told you tomorrow that you could get a talk with 50 people in front of you, would you do it? You'd probably do it, right? And so that's basically what you get every single week, or maybe it's only once a month or once a quarter. But if you build this list up, even if it's small, if these people are like your ideal client profile, like you get this chance to keep building and keep nurturing relationships. And, people really like to buy from people they know, like, and trust. And it takes time to build that. And I think this is a really natural way to do it, especially if you're not just giving them AI slop.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about what to put in your emails a little bit later. But I wanted to kind of touch on like the engagement piece, because we talk about that in social too. It's like, we don't really, promise that you're going to go viral or anything, but it's all about your audience finding you and engaging with you. So, and you mentioned open rates. So let's get a little bit technical. Are there any other metrics that you look at?
I look at open rates, and every once in a while we'll kind of go through and like, I think the word is cull the list, like we'll just take the people out that aren't looking at them because it helps with deliverability to get rid of those. I'll look at the click rate too sometimes, but honestly, I've passed that off to some of my other team members at this point. I used to get really obsessed with the unsubscribes.
Yeah.
I'd be like, who doesn't like me anymore?
Would you get the email notification too? So like you see immediately when they unsubscribed?
Yeah, I think I did, but I turned that off pretty early on. But I got really lucky. I got to hear a talk from Jay Klaus a little over a year ago. And, he gave some really good pieces of advice. And one of them is that, your newsletter is basically like a product for your business. And, I think his email newsletter is like 60,000. And he also talked about like, don't take unsubscribes personally. In fact, that's a good thing, right? You really only want a list of really engaged people. And so it's like, if somebody unsubscribes, that just means that, you have a more likely chance that the message will deliver to the person that actually wants it. And so, I really don't spend a lot of time looking at the numbers these days. If we make make changes. Like we made a change to the format a couple times this year, and so I'll pay more attention during those times. But once I see the numbers kind of equalize, then I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah.
Just kind of trust the process.
If you don't have anyone on your email list right now and you're starting an email list today, how do you get people on your list? Like, did you do anything specifically when you first started, or did you already have like a small list of like people you've worked with before that you just kind of added? Like, what would you recommend people do?
Well, I don't think you should add people that haven't given express
don't
permission
do that.
because I think that's against the rules. The email police will come to your door and put you in
Email timeout.
Yeah, MailChimp zoo jail. Well, there's a couple ways you could do it. You know, you kind of have to zoom out and look at your whole like marketing plan. Like, what are you doing as a whole? You know, a lot of small businesses are doing, you know, relying on networking and referrals. And so it's like, if you are networking, then maybe there's an opportunity for you to speak at an event. You know, in our community, we have like these lunch and learns with the local chamber. Sometimes there's opportunities to sponsor networking events. You could be the host for like a, you know, the Redmond Chamber does a coffee clatter, and, you know, you can put a thing where it's like, hey, there's a giveaway, but part of the giveaway is your, you know, signing up for my email newsletter. And so I think like that's like two ends of the spectrum. On the one end of the spectrum is you're like giving something away to like get their email. Now, there's a couple different ways to do this, but I think like that example where you're just like hosting an event and you're saying, hey, if you put your name in the basket, you get a hat or something, you know, at the end. That list is not going to be very like well qualified, right? And so that might be worth it though, because of the 100 people, 20 people might still stick around and say, well, I'm somewhat interested in this stuff. And so that's like a good like wide funnel way to like try to get some people in the early days. However, if you host the event and you only get 10 people to sign up, that kind of brings us back to the example of like, you have a very small list, but they're actually engaged. Like they chose to show up to your event. They chose to give their email at the end. Like those are the people. I'd rather talk to those 10 people than that 100 people. Although, you know, sometimes you gotta, you know, kind of go for both ends of the spectrum. So I would say, you know, the different ways I've gotten people to sign up for my email list have been through different things, you know, from events to, you know, hosting events to doing talks. And also like having lead magnets on your website could be a great thing.
Yeah.
You know, not a lot of people are fans of pop-ups, but there's something called an exit intent pop-up. We've all seen this before. You're about to leave a site, so you're going to hit that back button and this little thing pops up and it says, before you go, why don't you check out our, you know, 5 reasons for why SEO isn't dead yet PDF or something like that. And then people will be like, I mean, it's just my email. I can always unsubscribe later, right? And so that could be a way that you can get people on your list, and at least, you know, they're somewhat interested, right? I mean, there's other ways to build your list too, but I think building organically is the best way. And one thing to be careful about too is to make sure that you're getting people that are your ideal client profile and not just people that look like you. You know, like my problem was in the early days, I was doing a lot of stuff that would attract people to my email list that were more like also like digital marketing people.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, which I mean, maybe we'll talk more about that later, but it kind of made it so my list was a lot more of those people than the people we were trying to attract through the agency. So that's just like a word of caution, or to, you know, there's a term in email marketing called segmenting. So when people are signing up, you can say, you know, who are you? Because maybe you do a talk for your industry and people sign up for that. And you do want to talk to those people. Maybe you have a product for them or a service that you can offer to your colleagues, but you're probably going to want to send one thing to those people versus, you know, your ideal normal client profile.
I think that's a really good point, because it kind of goes back to like creating content for your audience, not necessarily for yourself or for like other people in your industry that you might get fired up or excited about. It's more so about like, at the end of the day, I mean, it's about making money, right? So, I mean, ideally, we'd like our businesses to stay in business. And so we have to kind of have that like ROI for ourselves and keep in mind that we're speaking to an audience who we hope will become clients someday. I like what you said about like, sometimes you have people on your list that maybe aren't as interested in what you're selling, basically, but then you've got other people who are. Do you see that as like a continuum of they're maybe they're just a little early, like in their journey, and then like here's my theory. Instead of posing this as a question, I'll just say, I have a theory that like if you get somebody on your email list, they see you showing up consistently, they hear what you have to say, like they see that they get to know, like, and trust you, right? And down the line, when they think, oh, I'm like ready to delegate social media, or I really need to overhaul my website, look at my SEO, then because you've been showing up in their inbox, they'll probably reach out to you. I don't know. Like, do you see that happening in real life? Or is that wishful thinking?
I think that's true. I mean, I think this is just like, take this from somebody that's never gone to school for marketing. But what I've learned from like being out on the streets and doing marketing, you know, out in the wild for, you know, almost half a decade now, is like everybody's at a different place of business, right? Like imagine like, I like this analogy of like, imagine you're in a square in a city and say it's just 100 random people, and you go up and you shake them by the shoulders and you say, hey, do you want SEO, or do you want social media, or do you want, skincare products, whatever it is you sell for your business, right? And like, I'll just think about like what we do for a second. It's like, of those 100 people, there might only be like 3 business owners that would even kind of sort of be interested in what we're doing. And so it's like, and of those 3 people, one of them might be like, I don't need this at all. The next person might say, I actually already have somebody for that. And one person might be like, maybe I hadn't thought about this before. And so it's like, contacted 100 people and only one person is like even kind of sort of interested, but they're not ready yet. I think email marketing really works for those people because it gives you a chance to build that relationship over time. And I think that's why, like, sometimes with it, this is important, just like with any part of marketing, you can go in a little bit or you could dive deep, right? If you really want to dive deep with email marketing, like you would probably, like, every time somebody subscribes, you would, build out a profile for this person, say, who is this person and where are they at on their journey? And we don't do that. I don't think I don't know if you do that,
No,
but that would be a great service to have. But it would be very expensive, I could tell you that much, because it's probably overkill for 98% of the people that sign up for your list. But if you could identify, like, hey, like, this person is maybe a very warm lead, or they're at the bottom of the sales funnel right now, so we can convert them into a client right now. Let's just ask, right? A lot of times that's a good, like, first email in a follow-up chain, like, hey, just so you know, this is what we do, and if you're interested, here's how you can book a call with us right now. Like, that could be a really good, like, first email, like, thanks for signing up, maybe we should just have a talk. And then if they're not part of that, because they say what do they call it, the sales funnel, right? 3% are in the very bottom, which means they have their hand over their wallet. The other 97% are still thinking, right? And they could be not even considering to thinking about it and maybe even weighing options, but they're not quite ready to convert yet. And so, yeah, I think your theory is right, where just based on that statistic, most people are not going to be ready to buy. So it's like, it's your opportunity to not sell, but to, build that relationship. That's really what the point of the list is. But like you said, our job is to hopefully provide good services to our clients, which translates into dollars and cents. And so we do need to sell sometimes. We need to ask.
Yeah, but I mean, it's an ongoing conversation. So we said at one point, like, we were talking about email marketing in another podcast or another blog or something, and I made the comparison that social media can be like sending someone a text, right? Like, you're in, you're out, you're maybe not consistent or whatever, or you're not having like a long conversation, hopefully over text, like sending paragraphs, right? And then like email marketing is like picking up the phone and calling somebody. It's like, let's have a conversation. And I think, you can have you can think of email like that, like it's just ongoing. I mean, and there's a lot of ways to do that, whether it's like you're going to do a series in something, or you actually have people sign up to like get your sort of like email education, like package of like 10 emails that are going to go through some kind of topic. Or you can just think of it as like week to week, like, hey, I'm like, here's my like check-in. Like, your email list or your email content is a little bit like that, right? So maybe like if you would tell us a little bit about how you, like, kind of what your strategy is for email specifically, and then how do you segment it to the people that are like in your SEO Academy versus future potential clients?
Yeah. So my initial strategy was to not have a strategy. And I could tell you that that's stressful. I was like, well, I should have an email list. I think it's like a lot of things as a small business owner. You're like, I need to be doing this. So let's just start doing it and see what happens.
Yeah. I think that a lot of us are relating to that.
Yeah. And so, I kind of just started a list. I was like, I'm just going to talk to people. I kind of like writing. I'm not that good at it, but I have fun with it. And so I was just, kind of like, whether it was loosely related to the YouTube video I'd made that week, go subscribe to the channel if you're watching this right now. Thanks for making it this far in. Hit the like button if you're on YouTube. Leave a comment if you're on Spotify. But anyway.
Do all the things.
Yeah, we need engagement. We always do. The algorithm loves us. But, it was like, either I talk about the video or, I just come up with something fun. There really wasn't a whole lot of strategy. There wasn't a whole lot of calendar. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, either I'm not going to keep doing this, or I'm going to try to figure out how to systematize this a little bit. And that's where I started to get some help with it, which is really cool, because I feel like that's kind of the service you offer, and that's what I needed. And so, when I started to do that, then it felt like I had like a strategy, and we were able to. The other big thing that I struggled with is in case you haven't told or recognized by this point in the podcast, I'm a little bit of a rambler and a storyteller. And so like I was just having these like kind of wall of text emails where I was like, well, maybe I should break this up a little bit. And so I was like trying to figure out like what segments made sense like, like sections.
Mm-hmm.
But even that was hard to figure out. And so brought somebody in and they were like, well, here's a formula that works. We see it working for a couple other creators that are much bigger than us. Why don't we try this? And as soon as I made that shift, I started to get feedback of like, oh, like your emails are a lot easier to follow now. And I was like, that's funny.
He has a formula.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the formula is?
I don't know what the formula is. Well, it kind of
like a format.
Yeah, it's like a
Like,
format.
yeah.
Yeah. I can tell you like what the theory is behind it because I didn't make the theory, if that makes sense. But it basically what we do is we take like whatever content piece we're like trying to feature for that week, and we try to break it down into like bite-sized chunks. Like there's like an easy win section, and there's always like an intro that's kind of like here's what to expect. And so there's that. And then the one piece that I like refused to give up was there's always like a one last thing section, which is something that I still write to this day. Every once in a while I might have AI help me if I'm like crunched for time, but for the most part I'll sit down and write those sections out, and I'll try to add in like a little personal flair. So it's like, hey, I did a running thing, or I went camping and it snowed, or, I don't know, like I'm at this conference. So I try to still make it very human because, until the robots completely take over, people are still working with people. And so it's like, trying to find those little threads where we can find commonalities. And so, yeah, so like the strategy kind of went from like not having a strategy to now it's like, each email is kind of formulaic, and also like there's a calendar, like there's like 5 newsletters scheduled right now, and I just had to put my little spin at the end. I could tell you as a business owner, like that feels a lot better to know, like, oh, I just have to sit down once a month and write a couple of these things, and also maybe proofread them a little bit, throw some Samisms in there, and I don't know, it makes my life a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, anytime that I can like tell people to just batch your content creation is, I think that's the key right there, because then you're not like scrambling last minute. I'm like super honest. I'm currently trying to get out of the email marketing like scramble. And we have other, content that runs regularly, but for some reason, like the emails are like the last thing that I've been able to like incorporate. But I think that, and I know that email works. And I think what I like about it so much is that it's a lot more trackable, like directly trackable to sales. And I wish that more of our clients would take us up on that service, just to like kind of see the direct ROI that they're always like looking for. What direct like trackable things have you seen come out of your email marketing efforts?
It's a couple things, so I have another business called Local SEO Academy, where I teach predominantly web designers how to add SEO to their business. And somehow we've gotten over the 100 mark of people in the academy lately. So that's been pretty cool.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's funny, like when I actually pay attention to like who's subscribing and where they're at and all that stuff, like I kind of watch people on that like sales funnel arc where it's like, maybe they watch a YouTube video and they sign up for a freebie, and then they join the list, and then they're like opening, clicking, opening, clicking, and so it's like they're engaging every week. They might skip 1 week, but then they're back on it. And then it's like, and then they sign up for the courses tier, and then they're out for a couple months, but they're still looking at the newsletter. And then they sign up for the community tier and they're messaging me and they're like, Sam, I'm ready to go all in. I've been, preparing for this for, a year. I've had a couple of people now that tell me like, I've been watching your content for, over a year and been on the newsletter, and then they, convert. And sometimes it's like, a new course drops, or, there's like a sale for Black Friday or something like that. Or we did a summit this year, which is freaking crazy. But a lot of people signed up on the back end of that. And so it was just, that's one thing I've seen where it's like, I can almost like track the customer journey for that like segment. And I think probably the coolest story I have from email marketing is, this was coming up on about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, when we had our first conversation. But we had, there was a guy, he watched a couple of the YouTube videos, consumed it, super knowledgeable guy, does wealth management. And you can tell he really cares about like the service providers he's going to bring on. And so he watched a couple of the YouTube videos, liked the way that I kind of broke down how SEO works. And I can't remember, I think he was signed up for the newsletter already, just through like one of the freebies we were giving away out there. But he, he reached out, he wanted to book a call. I can't really remember how that went, but we had the call. And, like a lot of business owners, he said, I think I want something more holistic. So I want to work with somebody that does all this stuff. And he had some plans for like outreach and things like that. And so he went with this other company that was definitely bigger than us. And I said, yeah, no problem. And he said, but I really like your guys' SEO approach. So like, don't lose my number kind of thing. And I was like, all right. And I hear that sometimes, and I feel like, the first company does a good enough job, and, usually they don't come back. But what I noticed with this guy, and I don't know why, but I just noticed it at some point in the middle, like he was still reading every email, every email he was reading. So he was still engaging in a way. And around that 6-month mark, he reached back out and he said, hey, the company that we hired is not really holding their end of the bargain. And I listened very carefully there. I teach people, how to sell SEO these days. And it's like, sometimes you got to listen when people are complaining about their current provider. What are they saying, right? Is this a reasonable request that they're making? Because some people can just never be satisfied, right?
Yeah.
I hate to break it to people out there, but there are rough clients.
Yeah.
But I really listened to this guy, and it was totally reasonable request, and I was like, well, it sounds like they offered to do X, Y, and Z, and they did X, and that's unacceptable, right? And and he's held us to that standard too. But anyway, the reason why I felt like the newsletter was the big differentiator is he got an email on Sunday, because that's when I normally send him, and I want to say he responded that Sunday or on Monday, and he said, yeah, I'd like to have a talk. And so we sat down, we talked, and we ended up not just doing his SEO, but also doing his website. And we're actually doing some AI SEO stuff with him as well. He's one of our beta testers for that. And it's been a really good relationship. And so, I like the way he's like technically minded, but that was a way where I saw like, whoa, like, the newsletter just equaled, well over 5 figures over the year for our agency. And, we have made a little bit of a shift. You talked about segmenting a second ago. And so like, we try to notice when people come into the email list that are more in like the SEO space, like we know that that's probably the service they want, because we've realized that usually when people are on YouTube watching a video for that, they're either trying to do it themselves, so they'll never be interested in our services. They just want some freebies, and we'll give them freebies because we like, knowledge is one of our core values.
We all like free stuff.
We all like free stuff, and we like giving away free stuff because you never know, that person might come back around when they blow up, right? In a good way. But a lot of people that are watching those videos are actually trying to vet like which SEO company they should move forward with, and like what would be good qualities in an SEO company at that point. So a lot of times we'll just reach out now. So we've kind of switched it. So now not only do we have our newsletter, which is a little bit more geared towards providers, which is still not a bad newsletter to send to people. That's to tell them like, hey, like we actually teach people how to do SEO. So like maybe you should just work with us. But we'll also start like a direct engagement sequence where we're just reaching out to them being like, hey, you want to work with us? Okay, you're not quite ready to work with the company? We could send you this free SEO strategy video. Then candesigns.com/video, by the way.
We'll link to it.
And then, it's like, then we just send them like some of the freebies and we say, hey, you're here, and this email list is more for these people, but you're still going to learn some stuff from it. So feel free to stay subscribed. And so that's kind of a little shift we've made lately. But yeah, it was really cool to get a client from the email list, and definitely felt like it made all the efforts worth it. And a lot of students for the Academy have signed up through it too. And so that's where we're going to put most of the energy moving forward. But if you're sitting there like thinking like, should I start an email list or not? The answer is probably, because you at least get to start to learn these things. And before I did this, like I had no idea who was engaging, what questions people would ask. And like, people rarely respond, but when they do, they're like some of the best questions. It helps you make new content, or sometimes even a whole new courses for stuff when I teach people, or maybe even new service offerings for an agency. So it's like, you never know like what you'll get from these things. But it's like, I don't know, business is so much about like building relationships, and this is such an intimate way. Like you said, it's not just the quick text that says like, you up? Just kidding, that's probably a bad example. But it's like a real like conversation where you get to like hear this person's voice in a way, but you also get to like dig deeper and figure out like who they are, and it like makes you into this like 3D person and not just this like little chat GPT text with M dashes and emojis on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever.
Yeah, and I think it builds up that trust factor for sure. When you do your process of reaching out to people who might be like potential clients, is that like a report that you kind of that you automate and then you like automatically send the email, or is that more like case by case, like you're in whatever ESP you're using, searching, looking at the data?
Usually what we'll do is we'll go through Kit. And then just because we've started to use like a hand raiser for some of our like lead magnets that we have. Some of them we know like this lead magnet is specifically for this person, but we've also noticed that like a lot of the providers will sign up for that lead magnet because they want to see what it is. So even though it's like the top five SEO strategies for $1 million contractors, but then we'll see like the last 10 people that signed up for it are like blankdesign.com. So it's like, okay, like the SEO and web design people want to know this stuff too. So we realize, so a lot of times the confirmation email will say, are you this or are you this? Are you a web designer, SEO person, or are you a small business owner? And then when they click that button, that leads them to the download link, but it also tags them. So we haven't set it up yet where we're automating that, but I kind of go through periodically and I just reach out to those people directly. We do have a couple sequences that we're starting to play with. So it's still kind of an experiment, but that's the cool thing. Like when you have a list, you can experiment and you can see like, does this work? Does this not work? And like you said before, like email is one of the things where you can get like instant feedback. You send that to 20 people and you say like, well, nobody responded to that first message. So so that probably didn't work. Maybe we should try a slightly
Yeah.
different message, or maybe we're just being too forward. Maybe we need to soften it up. Maybe we need to change the order. So there's all sorts of stuff you can play with email where, with like SEO and social media, it takes time. You got to build up, you got to build things up before you can really start to say like, this is working or this is not working.
So one thing that I've seen in kind of looking up like what's most effective in email is personalizing, and then obviously the segmenting too was part of that. But I think you use personalization, right? Is there anything that is there any like, I guess, special like AI tech stuff that you're using in email that you want to share?
No, there's no special AI tech I'm using. Like we were talking about earlier, there's definitely layers to email marketing, right? You could segment the heck out of your list. You could segment based on the lead magnet they signed up for. If you have multiple things, and you can say, hey, we know, you could have what do they call it? Like a conditional block. You can say, if they sign up for this thing, then specifically mention this specific thing. And I've done a couple things with that before with certain campaigns, but it's so much work on a week-to-week basis.
Like setting up workflows and
yeah,
like automation triggers and stuff like that.
or even just like customized blocks and things like that. A lot of times I'll just sneak in like the little curly braces first name every once in a while. So it kind of feels like I'm talking directly to you, and I am talking to you directly, darling. In those
I know
emails.
you are. Yeah, I know. But I'm like, yep, that's for me.
That's for me. But it's like, it's that little touch where it like makes it feel like a little bit more like it's for you, but it also depends on like the tone you use. Like I've heard Jay Klaus said this, I've heard this from other people where it's like, before you write your email, or really before you do any social media thing, right? It's like pretend like you're talking to somebody like over, like when I do like a YouTube video, I'll pretend like I'm looking over the iPhone on a tripod, which is funny because there's an iPhone on a tripod right here, and it's like there's somebody there and I'm trying to like actually help them. So I'm like trying to give them advice.
Yeah.
And I'm talking through the phone to that person. I can't see all the hundreds and thousands, probably millions of people that watch all my YouTube videos. Just kidding, it's dozens. Mostly my brother. Shout out to Dean. But it's like, as long as somebody's going to watch this and they're going to get a benefit from it, like I can show up for this fully. And it's the same thing with the newsletter. Like before I sit down and work on it, that's what I think, as I started to get team members that helped me write it, which has been nice to be able to offload that. That was the thing I really said, like, it's really important that this newsletter continues to provide value. Like I don't want to just put out a newsletter every week for the sake of putting a newsletter every single week. I want to actually like make sure that when people open that, they're like, ooh, Sam's got something to say. Hopefully it's, something important, or it's valuable, or it's, has to do with what was in the news, or it's going to help me move like my SEO efforts forward, or help me get that client that's going to make it so that I can, like one of our academy students recently is not taking on web design clients this summer because she's got enough SEO clients where she can just chill and hang out with her kids this summer. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And it's like, and she's one of those people that reads our email every single week. And so you never know those little micro adjustments that are made off of something like this. So, it's important. And so, you could do all this stuff to personalize it, but I feel like I don't know about you, but I spent many hours with ChatGPT and Claude down an AI rabbit hole, spending like 5 hours trying to over-engineer a solution where if I just would have sat down with a piece of paper and a pen, 30 minutes, I probably could have figured it out and moved on, right? And so, I don't know, like there's all sorts of stuff you can do, but if you just write it from the tone of like, I'm talking to another human and I'm trying to help them, I feel like that's the best thing you do. Those are the emails I read, right? Like we all have email newsletters that we're subscribed to that we're like, I don't want to unsubscribe from this because it's actually good. And so it's like, how do you write a good newsletter? And I think that's the secret code is like, just be helpful.
Yeah. You have kind of like maybe these two avenues or whatever that you're segmenting. So do you sit down and write like completely, I mean, based on what you just said, it sounds like you would write one email specifically to like someone who could be a potential client, giving them what they're looking for, right? And then one email that is like for people who are more on your like learning education, like other providers kind of track. If people out there are maybe feeling like they should segment their list and their content, but they're struggling with basically now we've given them twice the work. Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like on paper, but that's not what we actually practically do, So we tried to figure out like, what's the formula for the newsletter that makes it so that both audiences could read it and not feel alienated. And so that was kind of, the sacrifice we made is we said, we're just going to write it for people that are learning SEO, and that the person that's looking for a company wouldn't necessarily be turned off by that.
Okay.
And so that was kind of our compromise, because ideally we would probably want to have 2 different newsletters, but we just decided that was too much work. And so,
Yeah.
like I said, for the people that we think could be a fit for our agency, then that's where we'll hit them with more of like a sales sequence. It's more of a sequence, right, of emails, which is a lot different than like a newsletter, but it is still part of your email marketing kind of sphere, right? You need to think about these different things you could do.
That seems like a delicate dance or like, kind of a fine line to walk between they won't be turned off, but it's still interesting to them. I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably not the best move, but that's just where we're at in real time.
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, you can't put like all the resources that, you have in like just one part of your pie chart, right? You have to kind of, you do a lot of different things in terms of content. So
Yeah. And the other thing too, like I try to remind people, because, especially like as I teach people to try to sell SEO, they're like, should I have a newsletter? I'm like, well, yeah. And then they're like, so you're saying I got to do a weekly newsletter? I'm like, well, no, like that's what I do now. But like there's a guy that I follow, shout out to Eric Dingler, and one of his, and I know he ripped this off from somebody else, but I got to attribute to him because I don't know who the original person is. But he says, don't compare your now to somebody else's middle. And it's like, when I have like a student that's just getting started and they're like trying to compare themselves to me, it's like, well, yeah, but look, we've already done all this stuff and it's really not that far ahead. Again, the list is only 2.5 years old. So it's like you could catch up past this and do all sorts of stuff from it and learn from the mistakes we made along the way. It's like, but you don't have to do weekly. Like, I think that's the thing that scares people, is they think they have to do weekly.
yeah.
And it's like, if you do monthly, or I can't remember what this stands for, but in medicine, they have something called PRN. So, you might have a medication like, let's say it's like an anti-anxiety medication. You only take it when you're having a panic attack, right? They might prescribe that to you PRN as needed. And there's a gal that I follow, Michelle Burtbiniere. She does small site SEO for like national SEO, like SEO for copy. She's great. We're great collaborators. Got to meet her in person recently. And her email list is PRN as needed. She only puts it out when she thinks she has something that's important to talk about. And so, you know what that means? When Michelle sends an email, I'm like, this is important. I should probably read it. And I think that is a amazing strategy when you're first getting started out. Now, I do think there's also something about the regularity that's nice too.
Yeah.
Like some people, I know I'm getting email from them every Saturday or Friday or Monday or something like that. And so it's kind of nice. And I can kind of almost plan my day around it, right? I sit down, I have my coffee, and I said, let me just see what
you're
this
expecting
person's
it.
up to.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so like, I think open rates and, click-through rates and all that other stuff, engagement basically increases if someone's already expecting to hear from you. Some people think, or I've heard from clients, that weekly emails are too much, not for them, but for their audience. Like they assume that people don't want to hear from them that often. And then I always push back and say, well, what are you saying?
Yeah.
Are you saying something that's worth reading? Or are you just kind of like regurgitating, what you said the last time? What is your like opinion of that? Like, do you feel, I mean, it sounds like you do weekly, so that's, where you're at, but do you think there's like, is there a case for like sending email less often because you're worried about like annoying somebody?
I've been doing YouTube now for 2.5 years consistently. Please don't go back any further than that and watch any YouTube videos out there.
After that, like doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I remember, and tell me if you've had this before, because, we're doing Cringe Mountain here, right? So we're climbing it. But I remember thinking like, I don't want to repeat myself. Like, I'm like, I already made that video. I don't want to do it again. And
or like, they're tired of hearing me talk about.
Yeah.
Blah, blah,
this
blah.
is all I talk about, So it's like, and I started to like almost like shut down and think like, maybe I've covered all the topics. Maybe I've said everything I need to about SEO. And then I actually started to work with a YouTube coach for a little bit. And he was like, these are the first 5 videos you should do. And like 3 out of the 5 of them, I was like, I already did that, And he's like, yeah, but this is a different angle. This is a different take. And he's like, you're not just reproducing the same video. It's, it's different in this sense. And I was like, I never really thought about it like that. And the other thing that was pretty eye-opening is like, if you could find these people and they're willing to talk to you, like sit down and talk to them, not everybody sees all of your content.
What?
And so it's like, with the amount of reach we have on these platforms, from LinkedIn to Instagram to YouTube, it's like only so many of your subscribers or followers or connections are even going to see your content. And so it's like, you say something on Monday and you say something similar 2 Mondays later, that might be the first time they've seen that. And even if it does repeat, they'll just swipe up to the next thing, right? They don't really care. Nobody, like, unless they don't like you for some reason, like they're just
they
going to be like,
wouldn't be watching your content.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, okay, that's I've already heard them say that before. I think the worry is that you're going to annoy people by putting too much stuff out there. But the thing is, like, I don't know what the numbers are for this, but I picture it like sometimes like there are like a certain amount of people that are going to be annoyed, and like you're probably never going to win those people over. So like, just don't worry about those people. Also, there's a certain amount of people that are just not going to see your content. And so you also have to not worry about those people. And there's a sweet spot in the middle. And I don't know how big it is. It's probably a lot smaller than I'm thinking. They're going to see your content a little bit and they're not going to be annoyed by it. And they're going to actually hopefully appreciate what you want. And then, of course, of that list, there's going to be some people that eventually unsubscribe too. That's okay, right? We only, like I was saying earlier, you only want people that are actually engaging on your list to be there anyway. And so like, I think once a week is a pretty good sweet spot, you know, like if that's overwhelming for you, you just feel like you don't have that much content, like I can understand maybe wanting to turn down the cadence a little bit, but there is something to be said about that like consistency. And I think that's nice.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're all about consistency here. So, of course, I agree. That's not a surprise to anybody. But I feel like if you go the other way where you're doing it like once a month, or I mean, even sporadically would kind of make me nervous. Only if I hadn't like educated my audience, like, hey, you're only going to hear from me if I have something really like important to tell you. And then I would feel like every time I sent an email, I'd almost have to have that be like a disclaimer. Like, if you don't hear from me for a while, don't, like, it's fine. Don't forget about me, kind of thing. I don't know. I'm curious to know if that person like did that education or if it's just known that that's how they are. But
yeah, I think her list is pretty small. It's like 300 or 400, but she says she loves it like that. And I think her open rates are through the roof because of her strategy. But she, you know, she's been intentional about crafting her list through like, she does a lot of speaking at like, you know, private events, not private events, but like private communities, kind of like you did in my community recently. Thank you for that. And so it's like, I think for her that works. Now, you know, let's say you're like more of like a local business. I think that the consistency is a better thing. You know, if you have a service that you offer in the community, you know, a lot of times, whether it's a service or a product, you know, even if you're like a political candidate or a you know, a part of the government, you know, it's like there's usually like education that needs to happen, right? People are researching something. You know, we work with a lot of higher end contractors now, and it's like, hey, you're probably going to think before you invest $75,000 in a kitchen remodel, probably more these days, actually. And so, you know, it'd be nice to have somebody that's answering some of those questions that you have that are weighing on your mind of like, you know, what are the different options for cabinets, or like, should I get an island, or should I have an open floor space, or should I do this or that? Obviously, I'm not a contractor, so I don't know. But, you know, so it's like, these are questions you can answer, you know, truthfully from your place of expertise. And I think as the business owner yourself, there are a lot of tools that could help you with this, but I think it is easier to have somebody that can kind of guide you in this process, because as much as you could brain dump into Claude and it can produce something that's halfway decent, you still don't know like what the formula is to actually get people to open, like, is this the right subject line to actually get people to open it? It's kind of like SEO. It's like you spend all this money, you know, this beautiful logo that Dash Content Collective creates, and then you know, work on this website, which again costs a ton of money, and then you totally ignore the SEO, so nobody gets to that website. And it's like, oh, what was the point? So it's like, you can spend all this time working on your email, you don't work on the subject line, people aren't going to open it. And so, like, I don't know, that's why I feel like working with like professionals can be worth it. And it's a great, like, the other thing too is it's such a good compliment to somebody that's already got like a pretty solid website that's got a decent amount of content, or somebody's doing social media regularly, because then you have content to pull from all the time, and you're not like, you know, like I used to do when I first started my email list, sitting down Sunday morning with a shot clock of like 1 hour to go, being like, what am I going to write about this week?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to get to that in a second. But first question is, do you A/B test your subject lines?
I think we have before, but we don't consistently.
Okay. Just, you know, I like to give people ideas of what's working, what's not working. And then I think going back to kind of what you said about like having, what do you call it? The pie chart for like
The marketing
pie chart. When you're already making content in one area, it's a lot easier to flow it to all these other areas. Like, we were having a conversation about email the other night, and it's like, if you're already doing social with us, and we know that there's, you know, content being created, we have a content calendar, like there's stuff going on your website, or you're making products and you have new like product drops all the time, it's really easy to flow that into email. And I think that's why it like breaks my heart so much when people don't just give it a shot, because it's actually like the least expensive offering that we have. Hint, hint. But like, if you're not doing all of that, and if we're sitting down with a blank slate every week, then email marketing, you know, becomes a more expensive service just for us, because it is harder to do. And I think it, you know, tracks with what you just said. It's like you're making it harder on yourself when you're doing these things like one off and they're not connected together. So yeah, it all comes back to like having a marketing plan, I think, and then letting these things kind of like that like watershed effect like happen, where it just flows.
Yeah. And every business is at a different place. If you just started your business last week, like you don't need all this, right? And, you do, but you're going to have to be your own CMO for a little bit. You and ChatGPT and Claude are going to have to do your best, and you're going to have to figure it out. And, most businesses, when they're first starting, have to, go through the initial grind of you're going to get most of your clients, customers, patients, whatever it is, through networking and personal connections. And then eventually your first wave of referrals, your mom. Sounds like a joke, but anyway, but it's true, right? It's like those people, right? Because you didn't have to build the know, like, and trust of them. You already had that from previous connections and things like that. But eventually you get out to that point where you've exhausted all those things, and now you got to figure out, okay, like, where am I going to put the first chip? And usually, we've seen this probably with our clients, like depends, like the marketing pie chart, it's different for every business, right? Some businesses, me and Darlene did a talk just a couple months ago at the Redmond Business Summit, and people were coming up to our table, and it was like a collaborative talk, and people were like, do you guys work together? Like, well, not really. We work like collaboratively. We have different services, right? And it's like one person would come up and I'd be like, you need Instagram, talk to Darlene. And then somebody else would come up and you'd be like, that's an emergency service. I don't think anyone's going to scroll Instagram looking for this. So you should talk to Sam.
Exactly.
And so it's like, for a lot of these businesses, for a lot of businesses in general, the next step beyond like doing what you can is picking your one. And I think that's a really tough decision, because I think that's the make or break between like, point A and point like L, right, on your journey. As like, you kind of got to do a little bit on your own when you're first getting started, but then you get to a point where you're like, I got to put some of my eggs in one of these baskets, but I don't have enough to go around. And so you got to be really intentional and try to figure out what is the right first move for you. And I feel like all of our clients could use social media at some point, but a lot of them are just at that point where I'm like, if all you got is this much, then you better do SEO. And I bet you're the same way, where you're like, hey, SEO might be a good thing for you down the road, but if all you got right now is this much, then you want to start building a following on Instagram, because I can see how that can grow your business. But then you get to this point, right, where you reach this next level, and it's like, okay, now what else can you do? Now that you've started to see success through your first channel, what are the other things? And this is where, I feel like, we're kind of like specialists in a way, but we also know enough where we can be dangerous to start recommending people to go in different directions. And so it's like, like email marketing is always a good next layer to add, because now you've collected all these people. Maybe you have these leads from before. Maybe they went with somebody else, so it's a dead end. But if they didn't, they're still thinking about it. This is a way where you could retarget these people. And, there's always the option of paid ads, but then you got to pay money to Google and Meta. If it works, great. There are a fair amount of providers out there that offer really good services out there, but they're kind of hard to find. And, it's just as much a gamble. And I like email marketing because, it's like you're just trying to build a relationship, right? It's an extension of the thing you're doing before, and, before you can do the next organic thing. So I don't know, like, it's just, email marketing is like, I don't think that should ever be anybody's like first thing that they do, just in my opinion. Like, I feel like you're better off, it makes sense for your business, build your Instagram following, right? Start working on LinkedIn because you're B2B, right? Start working on your SEO because you're a local service business, but once you get to that point where you've gotten to, a certain level and you're like, I need to invest more, I think email marketing is a very natural, like, next step. And it's something you can even start building on your own. Like, by the time you're ready to invest in working with a professional with Dash, like, maybe you already have a list of 30 or 40 people, and you've sent a couple sporadic emails over a year, and you're like, I just need help figuring out what the heck to do, Darlene.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. Like, we always, when people come to us and they don't have an SEO'd website, we almost immediately are like, that has to happen first. Because anything that we do is not going to really track. You just won't see, like, you won't see the ROI. I mean, we wouldn't be helping ourselves keep our jobs if your website wasn't working for you. So we, refer them to you, or like tell them to go find somebody that they know, like, and trust, to get that done first. And then I think email marketing is one of those things that's like, it's kind of a cheap, like, fairly easy marketing activity that you can do at any point. It just depends on, do you have the time really to do it?
Yeah.
Even if you did it on your own, I mean, you're looking at what, like $30 a month for a email service provider.
Yeah,
like,
that's nothing.
Sit down and write something, and when you get to the point where you're busy enough, like you were saying, like, at some point you can offload that. But yeah, we usually see like the best success with clients that have some kind of list, and it's usually not huge. And then they're like, okay, I'm ready to like do this more consistently and, delegate that to somebody. But Yeah, typically it's not like we call it like phase 1, phase 2 or something like that. It's not like usually phase 1, and it's not why they come to us in the first place, but it's always something that I like to just kind of throw in the mix. Is like, hey, you should think about this.
All marketing comes down to two things: time or money. So it's like, if you got the time, great, but eventually you're going to run out of the time. Hopefully by that point you got the money, because like that's really what it comes down to. I think a lot of people, especially around our age and younger, are like, I'm kind of tech savvy, so I can kind of figure this stuff out on my own. And that works to a certain point, right? And then eventually you start bringing on team members and you start really growing your business, your practice, whatever it is, right? Your team, and maybe maybe you're just a branch of a bigger thing, and you're like, whoa, like I actually need help to get this done. You're like, oh, but now we actually have budget. And then that piece becomes like, how do I find, the person that I know, like, and trust, that I could work with? Yeah. I don't know. What do you think is the thing? I know you're interviewing me, but now I'm interviewing you. What do you think is like the piece that somebody should be looking for when they're looking for like a partner in like email marketing? Like, say that they've maybe been doing a little bit on their own, and they're like, okay, we're doing okay, but I don't know if I'm getting good results. Like, what should they be looking for when they're maybe interviewing a couple different people?
Yeah. Well, I think they should always ask for, like samples, basically. Like, show me what you've done for other clients. And I think it should be, when it comes down to like what we've said, what is effective in email marketing, where it's like, you want it to reach them, you want it to resonate, you want it to sound like you want it to build trust. Like, all of those goals should be reflected in the product that's being produced by somebody else. So if a business owner comes to me and says, like, I've got this email list and I've been writing my emails like this, and I want you to do it now, then it's my job to make sure that the way I'm writing and my voice is matching their voice. So, because we've worked together before, but like, I'm big on brand voice and having things sound like the business, the company, the owner, whoever it is. So I think like paying attention to messaging and brand voice is probably number one. Do the other people who are offering email service, like, are they matching that? Or is it sounding like ChatGPT or Claude? Because you don't want to lose that authentic voice ever. Like, no matter what you're delegating, like, that is I think the most important thing in the trust factor, aside from like, consistent visuals, because that's my other love, but continuing to sound like you, and to sound like the business, whatever that like core personality trait and value is. I think like losing that is really just watering down your brand. So
yeah, I feel like, man, we're just scraping the surface of like the AI slop era, and it already is so gross. And it's like, I, at the same time, like, I almost don't want to discourage people from using it, because it can create momentum, right? And it can create action. People go out there and they try to do an email list. ChatGPT makes their first one, and it's a lot of M dashes and emojis, but at least they did it. Right? They did so much more than the other person sitting back trying to craft the perfect email. And, maybe they see like, man, my unsubscribe rates are through the roof. I had a list of 10, now I have a list of 4, and it's like, okay, like, what do you do with that data? And, it's like, you could give up, or you can say, maybe I can do this a little bit differently. And so like, I really feel like the differentiating factor on all the social platforms, and with email marketing and with your website, it's like, please don't lose the human piece, because until the robots have automated us all away, which, maybe it's sooner rather than later, but hopefully not. It's like, people are going to be working with people for a long time. And so it's like, there are certain aspects of marketing where you kind of have to appease the algorithms as well. Right. I live in the SEO space where that's like the main thing we do, is appease the algorithms. But underneath that, we remember a human will get to this website eventually. For now, a human will get to this website, or make the ultimate decision, or maybe an agent will. But like, I don't know. That's a whole conversation for a future podcast episode.
But that's why, and we'll have to have you back too. But that's why, like, I love email, because you're not appeasing any algorithms. Like,
exactly.
Other than like staying out of the promotions tab, like you're in there and you're getting read by somebody. And so I think you can be more personal. You don't have to like keyword stuff. You can tell a story, you
can ramble a little.
Like we all do.
Run on sentences. Yeah, I think I was rambling, but that was the point I was trying to get to, is that with email, like, you could kind of take the algorithmic lens off and say, I can just talk to my people now for a second. And sometimes your email becomes the next piece that you talk about in an Instagram post, or sometimes it's vice versa, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of nice that it can kind of feed in two different directions, right? It's nice when you have that content bank to help write stuff with, but also it can help feed the next flow of things, or if you're going off of themes and stuff, there's all sorts of stuff. You guys are the social experts. I'll shush. But it's like, I don't know, it becomes this like positive feedback loop where it all helps. And it can,
Oh, yeah.
and like, even if it's just like, doing things like providing the occasional voice note, just, a professional that you're working with, where it's just like your brain dump of like, this is my hot take that, the rest of the people in our industry don't believe in, but this is like what makes us different. Like, I know that's the kind of stuff you want to be able to highlight. And so it's like, your thoughts should be coming through when you're working with a professional. And like, I know, like working with Darlene before, we did, some branding stuff, and I have like, I think 13 or 18 different PDFs about different versions of brand voice from all the times we went back and forth, because Darlene cares and she wanted it to come through 100%. And I think that's that's really important and shows that somebody cares. And that's the kind of person that you want, that taking care of your brand, that's out there. Because just like big companies like Nike or something like that will talk about reputation, right? The same thing is true for small businesses, especially if you're in like a smaller town. Like your reputation matters. And so if your newsletter starts to degrade in quality, or the thing you pump out every single week is just repetitive and it's not really serving a purpose, then it's like, why even do it? But it's like, there's ways where you can shift it where it can actually be valuable.
Yeah. So is email marketing dead?
I think email marketing is having its renaissance right now. I think that, because I don't know about you, but like, look at your inbox, right? I don't know about you, but like, as a business owner, my inbox is scary, right? It's a lot of cold outreach. It's a lot of, hey, thought this would look cool type of things. And it's like, I don't even like looking at my inbox nowadays. It's the occasional client email, and it's like a place I don't even want to go. But if you think about it, and maybe you're like me, like there's a couple people that you maybe look up to or respect, and when you get an email from them, you get excited, right? And it's a newsletter, right? And you're like, oh, I'm going to actually learn something from them. And it's probably, it's not always something I will like stop my day to look at, but I have like a special newsletter folder that I dig into with a cup of coffee, and I read these things. And I feel like this is a pretty common practice, because a lot of us are trying to be intentional about our inboxes right now. We're trying to not let that little red circle on our iPhones run our lives. I just turned that off recently and I feel so much better, like just way less money in therapy. Just kidding, still the same amount. But anyway, it's like, and so like, this is a way. And at the same time, I've also like signed up for a freebie online, and then gotten some AI slop newsletter on the back end of that. And I just unsubscribe right away, because I'm like, thanks for the freebie, I'm out.
Yeah. Or like 3 weeks later, I'm like, why? Who is this person? Like, why? How am I getting their email again? I have a couple people that I have like, I'll red flag their emails, and they're just, like you said, like newsletters, but I read them all the time. Who are your people? Give me like your top 3. My top one is Austin Kleon. I've been on, he's an artist and designer and a writer. I've been on his list for like over 10 years. And he does a consistent like weekly list he does like a listicle. So he'll always send like top 10. He has a name for it, but it's like 10 things or whatever from the week. And they're always, I like it because it's just like short little things. It's inspiring. He adds like visuals of his art, or like his like kind of like behind the scenes type stuff. And then another person is a marketing guy that Shannon, my partner, got me onto, Mark Schaefer. He does a lot of like content about content, and also has, things to say about AI and stuff. And his subject lines are really good. So it always makes me open his emails. The third one is another artist, and I don't hear from her as often, but she used to be she was like my regular, along with Austin Kleon, Elise Joy. She also used to have a podcast, which she doesn't do anymore. So she's still in there when I get her. She's one of those, like, when it comes, I'm like, oh, what's she gonna say? And she's a lot about like doing things offline right now. So she'll show like pictures of projects that she's done like in real life versus digital. And that's fun. It's just kind of a nice like break from the other stuff that I do all day.
The other stuff that's like,
did you find your
super
top 3?
businessy? Yes. So one of them is Josh Hall. He's my web design coach and mentor. And so even though like, I feel like I've heard everything I need to learn from him, for some reason, I'm still subscribed, and I still read it every time. I got Dash Content Collective, appears to be in here. Interesting. Jay Klaus, who I was talking about earlier, I think he has 60,000 people on his email list and like 100,000 subscribers. He runs something called The Lab, which is for like content creators. I don't qualify for it yet, but I have like aspirations to maybe one day join his community. And so I like seeing what he's up to. He's doing a summit soon, which I just signed up for. I recently started on Dan Martell's list. I don't always read his though, but I'm on there. I like his book, Buy Back Your Time.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I'm pretty selective. There's not a lot of people.
Oh, well, we're honored to be in that list. Jeez.
Yeah.
That means we need to send more email.
There's a lot of colleagues in here that I'm subscribed to their list, and I'll like read them every once in a while. Some of these are like students in the academy, like shout out to Alexia and Victoria. Like I like reading theirs, even though, you know, it's definitely part of their smaller audience. There's some guys in our industry in local SEO called Near Media, and they're the dudes a lot of the people I look up to. And so I like to follow their stuff. And even though I don't read it every time, like sometimes I'm just reading their like headlines, and like one of the things they niche in is like law firm SEO, which we do have like a law firm we work with, a couple actually now. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's like our specialty. And so sometimes I'll look at what they're talking about. This one is actually talking about review abuse, which is interesting, which you shouldn't do. It's actually an FTC violation now. So it's actually illegal to get fake reviews to your Google business profile. So don't do that. But anyway, like they'll talk about a lot of trends before many other people do. And so even though I don't read that one a lot, if the headline catches me, and that's the other thing too, is like, even if your open rate's not 100%, which it's never going to be, like, just remember, like, not every email is going to, you know, intrigue everybody. And so like, especially like even with the people I do follow, like I still don't read every single one. Michelle Bourbonniere is an example of one where I almost always read every single one, because you never know what she's going to say, and it is important. But the cadence ones, like a lot of times I will screen from the subject and say, okay, or I'll just open it and skim it. And I think making your email skimmable, having headers, that's something we've added recently. It's been very nice, where and I don't take it personally if people don't read every section, because I see how I do it. And so, you know, like if they get a bite-sized chunk out of it, that gets them to say, that's cool, and makes them want to open the next email, great, you know. Or if they say like, something's coming up soon, I should put that on my calendar because I might want to sign up for that. That's even better.
One other point I wanted to make, just since you brought up the sections too, is that if you're kind of starting out and you're like struggling to write every week, I think writing like a little bit less, and maybe even like only really having like one link or one button in your email can be like a good strategy to try.
Yeah.
So keeping it kind of really direct, but like really honed in on like one thing. So I love that you have like headers and sections, just from like an editorial standpoint. I'm like, oh, that's fun. But I think you could even, like, somebody who's hearing that might take that same idea and just break it out into 4 different emails and just use those for the month rather than putting it all into one.
Yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. You know, I just made a video that I thought was pretty good, but it ended up being, 25 minutes edited. And I'm like, dang, this could have been like 3 different videos. And the same thing with like LinkedIn posts, like I'll be like, all right, here's my 6 things for this. And it's like, this can actually be 6 posts. And so same thing with email, like people want to jam pack with all this information, but really like your audience can only consume so much at one time. And so having one call to action at the end is perfect, right? Even to take it to like old school, like, I've been in Toastmasters for a long time. I'm going to do a speech that I haven't had enough time to prepare for tonight. And like, I'm reminding myself, like, and I'm thinking of my business coach, Gary here, and he used to always say, less is more, Sam. Less is more. And so, if you can say more with less, then do it, right? And so, whether it's, a speech you're working on because you only had 2 days to prepare for it, I volunteered for that. So I like the challenge sometimes because obviously I like to talk. Or, it's a social media post, or it's an email newsletter. Like, less is more. Like, find ways to do that. Sometimes it's good to have a lot of content if you have a lot to pull from and it's skimmable, but sometimes less is more, and that can get you unstuck, get you momentum.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thanks for being on Cringe Mountain Diaries, and we will have to have you back. I'm going to link to all your things, but if you want to tell people where to find you, if you have any, like, I don't know, offers, freebies that you want to plug right now, you can do that too.
Yeah. If you happen to be a local service provider and you might need help with your SEO, even though we didn't talk about that today, thencandesigns.com/video, you can get a free SEO strategy video for your business. If you want to see what our email newsletter looks like, you can always unsubscribe later. You can go to localseolowdown.com. Super easy to sign up. First name and email. That's it. And then other than that, just, find me somewhere. Find me on the street corner. No, I'm just kidding. You can find me on LinkedIn and YouTube. We'll put the links below.
Yes, we will. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.